welcome to AFL on the Couch. My name's Peter Williams and we're about to go through all things AFL. So far this year we've seen 10 rounds down and another 14 to go. We've seen Gold Coast introduced, we've seen some teams rise, some teams fall. We're going to go inside and have a look at the different teams, how we think they've been going, then we're going to look at a ladder predictor and see what's been happening. Let's get started. Well, first of all, we look at the team that we all know from over in the south, Adelaide. They've been going alright so far, but been very up and down. They've shown patches, but they're going to need to really improve if they're going to be a chance in the future. They've got a gun in Patrick Dangerfield. He's going to be an absolute star. There's issues about surrounding Taylor Walker, whether he's going to go to Western Sydney. We've just got to see about that. There's a few other clubs that might be in the market for a tall forward too, so keep your eye out for that. In regards to Brisbane, next team, they've had a very rocky start. As I've said to several people, I think Jonathan Brown is the most important person to a team, like compared to any other team. In other words, not the best in the league, but he's the most valuable to Brisbane. The one that after that's Sandilands to Freo. Apart from that, if you took one player out of every team, Brown would be the biggest loss. And it's really shown this year with Brisbane losing first 7 games. They've won the past 2 though, which is quite impressive, but you can't see them really doing too much this season. There's an off chance they could sneak in, but really I think they'd be playing above themselves. As for Carlton, they've been a real improver. They've come out of the blocks, started really well, and I think they're a really good chance for top 4. And I would not be surprised to see them up there at the end of the year. It'll just be a matter of whether the forward line can still structure up, because they are sort of lacking a tall forward up there. They've got heaps of gun small forwards in Garlets and Betts and Yaron, who drifts down there. He's mostly playing in defence. He's been playing really well, but I would be very surprised if they didn't make top 4. In regards to Collingwood, they've been top of the ladder, and then they got beaten by Geelong. There was the controversial umpiring decision regarding Pendlebury in that game, so there's a lot of people who think they could still be top. At the moment, they haven't been playing at their best, but as Malthouse says, there's no point playing April or May footy. In September, you'd want to be playing September footy then. You don't want to be playing September footy yet, but they're slowly building up. Their win against West Coast was quite impressive over 4 quarters, so that was quite good. They're starting to steam up, and you reckon they'll be top 2 pretty comfortably. Essendon, now they've been a real big surprise packet. A lot of people thought, yeah, they'll improve under Hurd, they might come 9th to 13th if they're lucky, begin to improve, but nowadays anything less than top 8 is a failure. Looking at the way they've gone so far, some of the players are really improved. Cromary, how he couldn't have made a team last year, I don't know. He's an absolute star. Hurley, as long as he's played forward, because if he's not played forward, it's just a waste. He's a gun forward. Defence he's left out a bit, but forward he's really good, and they will make top 8. I'll tell you right now, they'll make top 8. Fremantle, oh, they're up and down. They're like anything, you don't know. Freo I've got missing the 8, because I think without Sandilands there, they're going to struggle, and I just found their forward line has just been lacking a bit. Some weeks they're great, but like when you kind of rely on Kepler Bradley, with Pavlich playing more midfield, Kepler Bradley is your main tall. As improved as he is, I think you're going to struggle. So I've got them missing the 8. As for Geelong, well, they're just going along it as per normal. What do you expect? They're Geelong. They're up there with Collingwood. They're the top 2 teams. There's no doubt about that. Those 2 are just great teams. They'll be 1-2. You can almost guarantee it. And they'll have a loss along the way. Maybe a couple, just like Collingwood, but they'll be up there, top 2. The Gold Coast, well, they're the new boys. What do you expect from the new kids on the block? Well, there's not much you can expect, and I expect they'll finish bottom. They'll be fighting out with Brisbane and Port, but I reckon they'll finish bottom. They'll tire towards the end of the season, but they might rack up another 2 wins in that time. I'm predicting. I've got them down 4 wins for the year. Um, I think they'll do all right. They'll be a force to be reckoned with in a few years, with Swallow and Vanel and Matera, who looks like a star. Um, they're all going all right, but I reckon they'll probably collect the wooden spoon, which isn't too shocking. As for Hawthorn, I reckon if they play at their best, they'll be top 4 pretty comfortably too. I reckon they are right up there with Collingwood and Geelong on their day. They've got to keep Buddy in the side. Like, I know we said Brown was the most important player, but in terms of X Factor and what he can do, he can tear teams to shreds by himself. If he could kick straight, I have no doubt Fred Fanning's record of 18 goals in a match would be broken. Like, Rewalt is the leading goal scorer at this stage, but I reckon Buddy's better. Only because Rewald is your conventional full forward type thing. He'll mark, he'll goal. He's an accurate kick, which is very important. Buddy isn't accurate, but he'll have about 1,000,000,001 shots at the goals. But he'll play midfield and has an endurance that will kill off many midfielders. So anyone who can be that tall and that in good endurance, I don't know. It's just amazing. They'll be top 4 if they keep it up. As for the Kangaroos, where do you put them? They're improving. I actually rated them in the 8, but they just haven't had the start they wanted. They came out, said we want shinbone of spirit in round 2 against Collingwood, and then got absolutely pantsed. So that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, they have been improving. Brad Scott's the right man to lead them. I have no doubt about that. Brent Harvey's had a bit of criticism thrown on him because he was bagging a few of the younger guys earlier in the year. He's realised he made a mistake with that, and there's been questions about his leadership and that, but overall he's a pretty damn good player. In regards to Melbourne, I don't know, I thought they were improving, but upon this year, I can't see them getting very high. I'm going to rule them out of finals. I know it's pretty big, but I actually rate Richmond and North above them, just because Melbourne have the tendency to just die, in the sense that they'll get blown away, they'll sort of give up, go, whatever type thing. Where North, they did earlier in the year, but they've sort of come back and they've been fighting, and Richmond too. Richmond have fought and fought, but they've just been outclassed. I reckon Richmond will notch up a few more wins than Melbourne. Port Adelaide, well, without being too nasty, they're a rabble at the moment. They just don't seem to go anywhere. They've had so many issues off field, on field. They were first team to lose to the Suns when they were 41 points up at home. It's been a horror season for Matthew Primus in his first full year. I've got them finishing 16th, just ahead of the Suns, by a win, but it's not looking good. At the end of the season, you'll see quite a few people either retire or be traded. The Cornses will be gone, one way or another. Motlop, if he doesn't pick up his act, he'll be gone. Roden, hopefully he'll come back from injury because he's one of their most important players. I mean, one of their best players is Hamish Hartlett, who hasn't even played 20 games of football. And Travis Boak, he's another star in the making, I tell you what. There's rumours he's possibly heading off to Victoria, but I don't know about that. Richmond, they're my big improvers. I'm actually really impressed with Richmond. For a few years now, I've been feeling like they've slowly been building up to something. And watching them in a few of these games, you know that they're playing for the coach, which is great. They didn't play for Wallace, but they're playing for Hardwick. And with Rewalt, who's going to be Coleman medalist, unless Buddy has his way, they know they've got something to kick to. What they've got to improve on is to have a few more options up there. They've reinvented Jake King, which is really impressive. I was one of the people who thought Jake King was gone a few years ago, but he's reinvented himself. Nahas, he's continually improving despite being a complete midget, but he's a good player. There's a few people waiting in the reserves too, like Nason. He's had a haircut, but he's good. He's going quite well. But no, I think they'll just miss the 8. They won't finish 9th. I've got them as 10th. I've got St Kilda just making it into the 8 at the end of the year. they've had a horror start. Like the off season was as bad as it could be. As a few people have said, if that ball had bounced differently in grand final one instead of Milne backing back and going through for a behind, we could be celebrating the premiers, saying how good they are, blah blah blah. But the mental scars from losing two grand finals and drawing one within the space of 3 years, coming so close to a premiership, um, is very would be very tolling on the players. I reckon they're going to be slowly building off. Like they're going to be going for a premiership, but at the same time they're blooding the youngsters. Jack Stephen looks quite good. Um, Armitage, who I've had raps on for ages, and everyone else I've heard has, and they've been stunned that he hasn't played yet. Um, Players like Cozzy, I think, are pretty much done and dusted. Cozzy doesn't have much to offer. He's had terrible injuries, but yeah, I don't think there's much to offer there. I reckon they'll just sneak into the eight. Top four's gone for them. They've done not enough so far. Top four's gone, but top eight, I think they'll sneak in. Sydney, I think Sydney are going quite well so far. Like, you know what you're going to get out of Sydney, as everyone says. You know what you're going to get. It's probably going to be an absolute nail biter, but you know they'll fight and fight and fight until they can get those 4 points. You're rarely going to see a blowout either way with Sydney. There's maybe once a season max with Sydney. Most of their games are pretty tight and close. But I expect them to make finals again. John Longmire's first year, I reckon about 7th, and just percentage off from Essendon. But I think they'll do well. As for the West Coast Eagles, I think they're the biggest improvers by far. I watched them last week against Collingwood, and they really stuck it. Like, I mean, sure they were beaten pretty badly, but with Josh Kennedy up forward, they're going all right. The only issue I have is with Mark LeCras. He was a gun, and ever since Kennedy's suddenly become the main target, he's sort of drifted away a bit. But he's really important. They need him to do really well. The back line, I think, could probably do a bit of work, but they did well holding up against Collingwood last week. West Coast belted the Bulldogs a fortnight ago too, so I don't expect them like to shy away. I think they'll make finals, and I think they'll just miss out on top four. But they'll get a home final, in my opinion. As for the Bulldogs, well, who knows? I think they'll actually they'll improve, but they'll miss finals, and it's sad because I thought they were quite good. I didn't think they were going to drop. I thought if anyone was going to drop, like most people, I thought it would be. I actually thought it was St Kilda who would drop, and they have dropped, but Bulldogs have fallen further because St Kilda have sort of been fighting, but you've been feeling like, they haven't quite been with it. Bulldogs just have sort of gone, not another season type thing. What are we going to do? Because everyone keeps going past them. Their game plan is good enough, as they said on the Cats the other night on Foxtel. They said the game plan isn't good enough to beat the top sides. They'll easily beat the bottom sides, but they're not good enough to beat the top sides. Now that everyone's doing the press, which Collingwood did last year, they're struggling because they can't beat that. So they're going to have to reinvent themselves. Liberatore and Wallace are stars. They're going to be real good in the future. But they've got to do something about the list. I'd be retiring Barry Hall and getting rid of some of the older guys because they're not going to help in the future. But overall, I think it's going to be a very close season when it comes to the end. Anybody could beat anybody, and even doing the ladder prediction, I thought anyone could beat anybody. But this is what I've got. I've got Collingwood, Geelong, Hawthorn, Carlton as the top four. Collingwood, Geelong and Hawthorn, funnily enough, I've got finishing on 19 wins each. I don't know if I've overrated Hawthorn a bit, but I think they'll all finish roughly around the same. I reckon they're the top three. They're the three best teams comfortably. Carlton sitting fourth, a fair way behind. They're sort of 18 points behind. I've got them with 14 wins and a draw. And wouldn't that be a blockbuster against Collingwood at the MCG? First final. Friday night blockbuster. That would be an absolute sellout. I've got in fifth is West Coast, followed by Essendon, Sydney and St Kilda.